Have you ever wondered why you do some of the things that you do? Have you ever felt an unseen hand that seems to guide you and push you to do things that you later regret or that hurt you or the people around you? Have you ever wondered what your purpose in all of this is? You know, as I look back on my own life, I see a person who's been swimming in a sea of misery and suffering his whole existence. And not just my own, but the people around me, my family, my friends, my colleagues. And it seems to me that just about everyone I know is light years away from experiencing true joy and happiness in their lives. And so I set out on a journey a few years back to try to make sense of it all. And in doing some deep soul searching and taking a look at all the many failed relationships in my life, I've come across some really amazing insights that I'd like to share with you. Please enjoy.
When you look up into the cosmos on a clear night, one of life's deepest secrets is revealing itself right before your eyes. The countless number of stars you see in the sky are only a small fraction of the billions of stars within our own Milky Way galaxy. And our own galaxy is just one of billions just like it throughout the universe. But what is really mind-boggling to consider is just how vast the sea of empty space is that exists between all of these various celestial bodies. When you look out into the universe, 99.9% of what you see is empty space. Total nothingness. A vacuum. Completely devoid of physical matter. But what exactly is the vacuum of space? What is this ocean that everything swims in? If there is no physical matter present, then what exactly is holding everything together? What is this substance, and what is it made of? The fabric of space is almost entirely vacuous. The closest star to our own sun, Proxima Centauri, is over 4 light years away, meaning that it takes our own sunlight 4 full years to reach our nearest neighbor. When you take a look at a scale model of our own solar system, you can see that it is almost entirely hollow. Similarly, when you look at the structure of an atom, where electrons are rotating around the nucleus, like planets around a star, you can see that 99.9% of the volume of the atom is comprised of nothingness. Taking it a step further, when quantum physicists begin to examine the protons, neutrons, and electrons, and break them apart into subatomic particles such as quarks, neutrinos, and K-particles, they find that even the nucleus and electrons are 99.9% space. At an even deeper level, these particles don't even exist as such. They are merely vibrational energy. Your physical body is very much like your very own universe, with over 100 times the number of atoms in each cell of your body as there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And your body is home to over 50 trillion cells. In other words, when you look up into the cosmos, into the vast nothingness of the universe, you are also looking into the vast nothingness of your own physical form. We are all made up of 2 distinct parts, the form and the formless. The body, which of course is physical, and consciousness, which is formless and is made up of mind and emotions, ego, memory, and intellect. When Einstein began to look at the science of the form and the formless, he had this to say: "There is no place in this new kind of physics both for the field and matter, for the field is the only reality. The field is the sole governing agency of the particle." And Max Planck, father of modern quantum physics, and pictured here with Einstein, is famous for this quote: "There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particle of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter." If you stop and think for a second about what these 2 famous scientists are saying, the implication is undeniable. You are the field. Like a drop of water in the ocean, your consciousness is a drop in the sea of universal consciousness. And so the question is, in all this vast perfection, in all this beautiful, wonderful brilliance, how is it that there is so much suffering in the world? Why is it, given that we are the formless, we are the field, that things got to be the way they are right now? Why is there so much unhappiness? And why is there so much misery? And why is there so much craziness? Why is it that we need so many psychologists and healers in the world working to help people cope? Isn't the same consciousness that is the force behind the sublime precision of all of creation the same consciousness our minds are all made up out of? And if so, then why isn't everyone on the planet filled with joy and love? The answer to this perplexing question involves a close examination of consciousness, evolution, reincarnation, and instincts. Of all the amazing stories of instincts in the animal world, perhaps the most remarkable is the migration patterns of the monarch butterfly.
Each summer, an extraordinary migration is fueled by millions of tiny eating machines. Gorging themselves on milkweed, they grow large enough for transformation from caterpillar into one of nature's most sublime creations, the monarch butterfly. Generation by generation, waves of monarch butterflies will migrate northward through the United States as far as southern Canada. As many as 4 generations are produced each summer. The 4th generation appears no different from those that preceded it, but it is. Instinct tells it not to mate, but to accumulate fuel urgently, loading nectar through a straw-like proboscis. This generation will live at least 8 times longer than its predecessors, enabling it to complete the longest and greatest insect migration on Earth. Using prevailing winds when possible, they labor to cover about 100 miles a day. Escaping the northern winter, they navigate toward a place last visited by their great-great-grandparents. Converging from across 2/3 of North America, as many as 500 million sweep southward toward central Mexico on journeys of up to 2,500 miles. Only 1 in 5 survives the hazards of the long migration, but their numbers are so vast, 100 million complete the journey, arriving each year in the same small patches of mountain forest that ensure their survival through winter. How something the size of a leaf can navigate across an entire continent to a place it has never been remains an unsolved mystery of nature.
But is it such a mystery after all? If you factor in reincarnation into the picture and combine that with the knowledge of consciousness from ancient sages, you can begin to piece together an entirely new composite image of how traits and tendencies in the form of instincts are propagated through a species. Significant evidence exists proving the existence of reincarnation, and Dr. Ian Stevenson of Virginia University spent 40 years of his life collecting empirical data on reincarnation and has published his findings extensively.
I was simply watching television one day and I saw the BB special on reincarnation, and it was very accidental, and Ian Stevenson was standing there talking quietly about case studies he had conducted over a 15 or 20 year period, and they showed on the television the book 20 cases suggestive of reincarnation. I thought that might be very interesting, so I went out and bought the book and I started reading the book, and one of the things you'll find that when you read the case studies, rather than talk about what they are without reading them closely, there's a kind of force to the case studies that is really enticing, enthralling. And what I did is I read them all the way through, and I put down the book and I said, well, now this must be wrong. And and I started reading. So I began reading it, and the more I read, the more I realized that this was important, and it was good research, empirical research, and that it rendered it a scientific question, and that I couldn't think of any alternative explanation as plausible for the data as that some people reincarnate. As a matter of fact, some people have said, after reading the data in the past 10 years, some people have said, look, maybe it's not unreasonable to believe that some people reincarnate. And Stevenson says that. It's certainly not unreasonable to believe, because this is the best fit on the data. My reaction is stronger. My claim was that, in the book, that it's irrational to disbelieve it. And a lot of people thought that went over the top. That was too strong a claim. I meant it in a very simple way, that if you have a very commanding argument that you can't refute, not to accept the argument is to act irrationally. That's what I'm saying, that there's a very strong argument here that has not been refuted and cannot be refuted by my lights. Not cannot, but has not been refuted. And it's irrational not to accept it. And the conclusion of that is some people reincarnate. Meaning, by implication, that human beings are more than their bodies, that human personality in the end is not reducible to a statement about biochemical states, brain states, biological properties produced by brain states, or anything like that.
Whatever. There you go. I wish you could see what James was doing right now.
11-year-old James Leininger looks and acts like most boys his age, but beneath his playful spirit is a very deep soul.
And I said, you know, I'm really glad you're my son, and I'm just really fun to have you as my son. And he says, well, I know, that's why I picked you.
When we first met Bruce, Andrea, and James in 2005, his passion for World War II fighter planes was obvious.
I can beat the Japanese easy as pie.
The fascination began when he was a toddler.
The pilot put them on?
James seemed intimately familiar with the aircrafts.
He started doing these little drawings of airplanes shooting at other airplanes or being shot down. Bombing ships, you see men parachuting. Here's another one where planes are dropping bombs. This is a carrier.
The violent drawings were followed by extreme night terrors.
He would just be crying. He'd say, airplane crash on fire, little man can't get out. He laid on his back and kicked up at the ceiling, and he goes, Mama, the little man's going like this. And he laid on his back and kicked his feet up. The little man's going, ooh, 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 can't get out. And I said, well, who's the little man, baby? And he goes, me. I thought Bruce and I were just going to faint.
They questioned, what kind of plane?
Corsair.
Why did your airplane crash?
My plane was shot down.
Who shot your plane?
He looked at me like I was a village idiot. He said,
the Japanese.
Where did he take off from a boat?
Do you remember the name of your boat? He said Natoma.
And his name?
He always said James, but his name is James.
Stunned by his son's words, Bruce tracked down veterans of the USS Natoma Bay.
I wanted to disprove it.
Columbus, Ohio native Leo Pyatt served on the ship.
He asked a few questions about, did I know some of the people? Oh yeah, I remember those people. Yes, there was a Jim Houston, a rather large shell. Just hit him in the engine, and it burst into flames and went down.
It was all real. James Houston, born and raised in the Midwest, was shot down over Chichijima, Japan.
He got very quiet.
The Leiningers were speechless again when James met Natoma Bay veterans and recognized them by name.
You're Bob Greenwald. I'm serious.
He'd never met Bob Greenwald?
No, he'd never met him before.
They tracked down James Houston's sister, Ann.
And he goes, it's not Ann, it's Annie. She wasn't my oldest sister. I had an older sister than that. And I said, you did? Who was that? And he goes, Ruth. I mean Ruth.
Annie is what they called me when I was little. Knowing my name and my sister's name, things that my brother did when he was a kid. It's too amazing to describe.
James recalled his favorite childhood possessions, and when we spoke to them via Skype, they shared one specific story involving James Houston's mother.
Annie had sent James the picture that her mother had painted of James Houston. And when James got it, he called Annie to thank her, and he said, "Where's the one Mom painted of you?" And so she went and found it and sent a copy, and later on she told us that no one in the world except her brother and sister knew that there was an identical picture of Annie when she was the same age.
Amazing stories like that caught the attention of Japanese filmmakers. Not long after our story aired, they flew James and his entire family to Chichijima, Japan, and the site of James Houston's plane crash.
Took a tour of the island, got up on a ridge overlooking the harbor. James said, "This is where the planes flew in the day my plane was shot down."
Without any help, James knew exactly where the plane crashed. They held a memorial service and dropped flowers over the wreckage.
And James just got so emotional and just lost it. And it was just the most heart-wrenching thing.
But when it was over,
it was cathartic.
You know, it still gives me goosebumps to think that we actually got there and we were there and we were able to close the loop, especially for James, that it was something really important to him.
And when they returned, the death and destruction pictures were replaced with this.
There's dolphins and there's the Japanese ship has its flags flying.
At James's urging, they put all of this and many more incredible stories on paper and published this new book, Soul Survivor.
I hope that it helps people understand the meaning of how precious life is, how fast it can just blow away.
The Leiningers say they aren't promoting reincarnation. Before James, they didn't believe in it.
And I really believe that there's a purpose to this story and that the God that created us wants this story told.
And I also hope that it opens people's eyes up to reincarnation.
You do?
Yeah, I hope it opens people's eyes up to the fact that reincarnation can happen. It is a possibility. It's not a lie.
Well, what follows is that human personality, as we know it, cannot be adequately understood in terms of classical standard psychology, which works on a purely materialistic basis. In other words, to explain human behavior, why people do what they do, on a purely materialistic model, which we typically do, will leave important things out, because if human beings are more than their bodies and their minds are causally relevant in producing their behaviors, and the minds are not simply brains, then to explain the behavior you have to appeal to causes that are quite unlike anything people in standard psychology talk about. So one of the implications of this would be that there's something wrong with psychology as we know it on a purely physicalistic model, that it will not be able to succeed in explaining these kinds of cases, and probably not a number of others. So, I mean, but there will be other objections too. I've heard people say reincarnation couldn't occur because we don't know how it could occur. We don't know how. As scientists, we don't know what the mechanism is. We don't know how it couldn't have a mechanism that we could examine, so we can't know that it occurs. As objections go, that certainly leaves a good deal to be desired, because you may not know how something occurs, but have plenty of evidence that it occurs. I don't know how Slewfoot won the 5th race at Hialeah, but I can know that he did very easily. I don't know how you got into this room, but I know that you're here, that sort of story. So you don't have to know why things end up the way they are. Although in mature science, all our explanations will be causal. But there are kinds of explanations of events that are not causal, but they're purely statistical. You know that something's occurring, but you don't know why.
What the research suggests is something that the rishis, swamis, and yogis of India have known for tens of thousands of years, which is that consciousness is a continuum. There is a quality of persistence in consciousness that goes beyond birth and death, and that carries with it knowledge from one generation to the next. Impressions ingrained in our consciousness accumulate from one lifetime to the next, and carry with them conditioning and patterns of behavior. These great seers of India have shared with us some very amazing knowledge that reveals that consciousness flows through generations of a family, like tributaries to an ocean. Taken separately, these 3 points make for interesting topics of conversation, but put together, they begin to solve one of life's deepest mysteries. We've learned that if a parent meditates, their children receive a direct benefit from the parent's meditation. Meaning that not only do children realize an indirect benefit of their parents being more calm and centered, but their consciousness is directly impacted through their parents' meditation, even if they are halfway around the world. And we've also learned that if a person were to become enlightened, that 7 generations of their ancestors would also instantaneously become enlightened. And one more important bit of data that we've learned from these seers, and this is crucial, both in understanding evolution as well as understanding instincts and the migration patterns of the monarch butterfly and every other instinctive behavior on this planet, and that is this. At the moment of conception, 1/2 of the impressions on your consciousness come from your previous birth, and 1/2 of the impressions come from your parents, 1/4 from your mother, and 1/4 from your father. And this goes a long way in explaining how traits and tendencies are passed along from generation to generation. The monarch butterfly's mother and father were obviously monarchs, but the butterfly may have been a moth in a previous birth. And there's enough memory, there's enough persistence in the consciousness of the monarch to get it 1,500 miles back all the way to Mexico, even after 4 generations. When you put these 3 knowledge points together, you begin to see that while there is just one universal consciousness, there's a special relationship within a family of the traits and tendencies and how they are carried along from one generation to the next. Furthermore, Stevenson's later work suggests that there's a link between birthmarks in this life and how we've died in our previous birth, thereby providing a bridge between intelligent design and Darwinianism. The implication that consciousness from a previous birth can affect the biophysiology of the next birth has staggering implications for evolutionary theory. There is also a special link between the instinctive patterns of plants and animals and the mental patterns that lead to human suffering. While Western psychology has not always done the best job of lifting people up from out of their sorrow, their peer-reviewed, scientific approach to examining, cataloging, and diagnosing different mental conditions does have a significant amount of value here. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, over 27% of the adult population in the United States suffers from one of 10 different personality disorders. Beyond this 27% are dozens of secondary disorders. Until very recently, Western therapists considered these people incurable and destined for a lifetime of their condition. But with the right combination of pharmaceuticals and therapeutic counseling, they could look forward to living out their years in managed misery. And on top of the fact that nearly 30% of our adults are considered to have a serious mental condition, within the next few years, it is predicted that over 50% of the adult population in the world will be suffering from clinical depression. And before you want to let yourself off the hook and want to believe that you're in the lucky half, analysis by experts in the field of codependency suggests that over 80% of the adult population suffers from one form or another of codependency. To put it bluntly, the overwhelming odds are that you're suffering with at least some degree of degraded mental health. We all are.
So what exactly is mental illness? Illness of the mind, of the consciousness? While less than 1% of mental disease is attributable to biophysical causes, the overwhelming majority of mental illnesses are afflictions of the non-physical, not of the form but of the formless. Distortions within our own personal fields of energy that impact the way we perceive the world, and thereby having an effect on the way we move through it as well. So how do Western mental health professionals go about diagnosing a patient? There's no blood test for personality disorders. There's no MRI that can scan a person's consciousness and provide a readout. The mind has no pulse to feel or heartbeat to listen to. So what clinicians do is they administer a personality inventory test that measures a person's traits and tendencies. And then they match up these traits and tendencies with those of people with known personality disorders, and then they make a diagnosis.
The list of these traits and tendencies is enormous, And this is just a partial list. In the case of the monarch butterfly, it's their instincts that developed over tens of thousands of years to take them on their 1,500-mile trek. Similarly, it's taken us tens of thousands of years to develop the patterns that make up our personalities. Instincts are a set of traits and tendencies that drive an animal's behavior. What I'm saying here is that mental habits associated with mental illness are all instinctive. Except unlike the migration of the monarch butterfly, or any number of other instinctive behaviors we see in nature, from everything including flowers and plants germinating, to salmon spawning or bears hibernating, where the instinct guarantees the future of the species, in humans, our adaptive instincts guarantee the survival of our egos. Our egos initially developed to help ensure our survival, but in the end they have turned against us. You can look at the ego as some sort of rogue artificial intelligence software program that has taken over control of the machine and put its own survival ahead of that of the bigger mind that it is part of. All of our undesirable traits and tendencies are tools in the ego's arsenal of weapons to prevent you from knowing your true self, which would result in the annihilation of the ego. The realization that our undesirable personality traits are instinctive can be extraordinarily empowering. No longer can you blame your mother for being self-absorbed or blame your father for being an alcoholic. If you start to blame, where does it end? With their parents or their grandparents? You would have to go back 4 billion years to the microbial life that we evolved from to find the root of your problems, and even then you probably wouldn't be going back far enough. The beauty of this is that you get to stop blaming yourself too. There's no doubt that whatever situation you grew up in had an impact on who you are, but in the big picture, the impressions made on your consciousness in this lifetime pale in comparison to the accumulated grooves in your mind that have taken eons to develop. Many times in interpersonal relationships, where mental diseases cause the most grief in our lives and the ego is the most vulnerable, the heart wants to shut down the ego, but the ego perceives the attempt as an attack and turns around and destroys love in order to defend itself. If you remember the Terminator movies, you can compare the ego to the Skynet artificial intelligence software program. In the Terminator storyline, Skynet was originally installed into the US military mainframe to control the national arsenal to defend the country. Shortly after the Skynet software was installed, it gained self-awareness, and the panicked operators, realizing the extent of its capabilities, attempted to shut it down. Skynet perceived the attempt to deactivate it as an attack and came to the conclusion that all of humanity would attempt to destroy it. To defend itself, it came to one conclusion: humanity must be terminated. Our egos will also stop at nothing to defend themselves. The comparison of the ego to a rogue artificial intelligence software program is especially appropriate when you stop to consider that every organism on this planet is in fact a biocomputer. From this perspective, you can see that the hardware is the physical body, the plant, the bacterium, etc., and the organism's consciousness is the operating system that manages the life form's function. When the physical body dies off, the consciousness persists, taking its knowledge to yet another life form. DNA performs actions based on information provided by consciousness on what a cell's function is supposed to be. The blueprint for the organism as a whole is stored within the consciousness, and the information is provided to stem cells, which then can morph into any number of different cell types. In fact, every cell in your body is a biological nanocomputer, complete with sensory input, output, power management, networking, etc. As Microsoft founder Bill Gates has said, DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software we've ever created.
The cell membrane is a liquid crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. When I wrote it down and stopped and looked at it, I said, my goodness, those words, I've read those words very recently. And there on the corner of my desk was a simpleton book about computers. On the third page was a definition of a computer chip. And it happened to be a crystal semiconductor with gates and channels. And all of a sudden, the first thing I said, wow, what a coincidence. The cell membrane has the same definition as a computer chip. But then all of a sudden, this rapid download of information revealed that it was not a coincidence, that they were actually homologs of each other, meaning not analogy. I'm not saying the membrane is like a computer chip. I'm actually saying molecularly and functionally, the membrane is the same as a computer chip. And that the nucleus with the genes is a hard disk with programs in it. And what was important as I'm typing all this information on my computer is I realized, well, all the programs are in the computer. It's the data that I type on the keyboard that really operates the mechanism. And I realized, my goodness, the cell membrane is a keyboard, and that the environment is the typist. And as the cell goes from one environment to another environment, whatever the conditions are in that environment, they type on the receptors, which are the keys of this thing, and then elicit programs from the genes. So it was like this thing just hit me and said, oh my God, we're not programmed from the genes, we're a dynamic aspect of the environment. Underneath our skin is a population of 50 trillion cells. Every cell is a living sentient being, living in a community, each with jobs, each sharing their environment, each contributing to the whole, each getting something back from the whole. The human's a reincarnation of the cell in the sense that everything that I do as a human can already be done by every single cell. Every function I have in my body is already present in every single cell. That I am the cell at the next level of organization again. And so that's why you can study cells and know about people.
4 billion years ago, there was an explosion of growth as the planet's very first biological nanocomputers came online and began to populate the Earth's oceans with an incredibly diverse set of organic life. The consciousness of each life form continually evolved, continually upgraded, and continually advanced as the physical being also became more and more sophisticated. It's really quite amazing when you begin to realize it. Out of the primordial soup our planet was endowed with billions of years ago, the most primitive life forms came into existence, and out of these single-celled organisms, all of life on Earth evolved. Evolution comes as a result of a symbiotic partnership between consciousness and the biological life that it supports. For 3 billion years, these biological microcomputers stayed relatively primitive. But over time, entire subsystems evolved to support locomotion, environmental sensory systems, digestive tracts, offensive and defensive armaments, immune systems, and so forth. In a way, they were replicating the functions of the individual cell on a much larger scale. By 500 million years ago, advanced life forms with fully developed sight, taste, touch, smell, auditory senses, limbs, etc. had evolved. And all along, the knowledge embedded in the consciousnesses of all these creatures became more and more advanced. And every so often, due to solar disturbances, asteroid collisions, or volcanic eruptions, our Earth would experience tremendous evolutionary growth spurts, bringing us to the present day.
In very much the same way that our cellular membrane is a homolog for the microprocessor, at a higher level, functionally and logically, we are all very much the same as the modern personal computer. But who wants to be thought of as a computer, a robot, conditioned with a pre-programmed set of instructions to carry out? So a much better way to think about it is to turn it around. Rather than think about yourself as a computer, think about computers as artificial organisms that we've created out of silicon and software. From this perspective, it's a lot easier to get your mind around the whole biocomputer model. Just like us, computers have a nervous system with a brain, they've got long-term and short-term memory functions, they've got a heartbeat, they can communicate with us, and they can communicate with other computers. And just like us, computers are vulnerable to attack and breaking down. Thank you for that.
Computers are very much replications of our own selves, except without the self-awareness and consciousness. And when you begin to understand how the operating systems work inside computers, the parallels between human beings and modern personal computing devices are even more astounding. At the heart of the computer is a stream of ones and zeros that can be looked upon as very much a vibration of energy, with this vibration representing a rudimentary set of primitive commands. Over the years, higher-level computer languages developed that could represent advanced constructs and that could also be converted back to the primitive instruction set. Initially, software programs were simple, self-contained sequences of commands, but over time, developers began to create functional building blocks like routines, functions, macros, and libraries to assist in building larger and larger software applications. And in much the same way that earlier programs could be partitioned up into subcomponents, with the advent of computer networking, distributed software components running on separate computers could work together to perform complex operations. In other words, microcomputers went from being single-celled artificial organisms to multi-celled organisms to the computers themselves being individual cells in an even bigger artificial life form. All of this mirrors exactly how life evolved on this planet, only at a much faster pace. In both the evolution of computers as well as evolution of natural life forms on Earth, it wasn't random genetic mutations that caused evolutionary growth, but rather consciousness that pushed evolution towards creating new and advanced physical forms. And in much the same way that computers can incur damage in the form of corruption, we humans can also be corrupted. At the cellular level, corruption comes in the form of aging and cancer mutations, and at the gross level, systemic corruption can come either in the physical form, like with a flu virus, or can come in the non-physical form with something like harmful mental habits. If you can get your mind around the notion that you are, in fact, a biocomputer, does it not make sense then that maintaining a healthy human consciousness also requires the same level of attention on system maintenance that a computer does?
Well, imagine that you yourself have been designed, evolved to be the most positively brilliant quantum-level computer processor, solution generator, ever evolved, designed, devised on planet Earth. The huge problem is that over the course of us growing up, most of us have taken on a whole series of computer viruses. So imagine that within yourself you might have as many as 100 major viruses, which are clogging the ability of that computer to function at its most brilliant levels. And on the other hand, imagine if you could learn to clear that processor to the point where it would begin to totally hum, in tune with the quantum field, at such a level of openness and vibratory awareness that it would actually begin to function at the level that it was truly designed to function at.
Western mental health professionals have a list of hundreds of traits and tendencies used to cross-reference with the patient's mental habits to diagnose them of having one of dozens of recognized disorders. Buddha had but one word to define human mental illness. He called it samsara, or the disease of repetitive birth, life, death, birth cycle, and that all of human sorrow and suffering comes as a result of cravings and aversions. Buddha also taught us that the cure for this disease is meditation. Many masters before Buddha and many masters after Buddha emphasized meditation, but what set Buddha's teachings apart was the idea that it is vibrations within the body that are what holds the coupling between our desires and our behavior. We're not addicted to ice cream. We're addicted to the sensations associated with eating ice cream. Remove the sensations, and you remove the desires connected with them. By sitting with our eyes closed and observing sensations while remaining still, we're able to cure ourselves of the addictions. When you have a thought, that thought gives rise to an emotion, which resides somewhere in the mind. When that emotion comes up in the mind, there is a correlating sensation somewhere in the body, and when this sensation occurs, it gives rise to yet another thought, and so on. Through the art of meditation, you can break this cycle and decouple your mind from your body, and experience pure bliss. The human nervous system is the most exquisite instrument on the planet, and mastering your mind requires a sustained and determined effort, just like learning to play any other fine musical instrument. While activities like hiking, cooking, and gardening all have meditative qualities, and prayer is an even deeper connection with universal consciousness, none of these methods of calming the mind accomplish the same mental mastery that true passive meditation does. It takes years to become proficient at playing a violin. Why should learning to meditate be any different? Things like yoga, breathing techniques, and taking care of what you put into your body help tune up the instrument, while meditating is playing it. In meditation, extreme rest can be achieved by finding the off switch for your intellect, memories, and ego, and learning to repose in the self. Every great master that has ever walked the earth, from Krishna to Buddha to Jesus to Muhammad, all have said the same simple thing: meditate. Muhammad said, "An hour's worth of meditation on God's creation is worth 70 years of prayer." Buddha said, "Know well what leads you forward and what holds you back, and choose the path that leads to wisdom. Meditation brings wisdom, lack of meditation leaves ignorance." And Krishna said, "Those who are temperate in eating and sleeping, work in recreation, will come to an end of sorrow through meditation." Bringing this back to the biocomputer model, our heart, which is our true core processor as well as our wireless networking interface, is known to oscillate in one of 3 different frequency domains: fear, hate, or love. In computers, the entire world of software applications, component libraries, operating systems, networking programs, content management systems, programming languages, and database management systems are all developed above layers and layers of abstraction that can all be distilled down to a single layer of machine code. Incredibly, this machine code layer that the entire world of computer technology is built on is relatively the same as it was 40 years ago, and only has about 50 to 100 basic commands. In much the same way, all of human mental activity, from thoughts to language to beliefs and concepts to ideologies, laws, traditions, cultures, and philosophies, are all derivatives of a relatively tiny set of pre-thoughts that is less than 80 basic patterns. However, because of the fact that we can vibrate in 3 different frequency domains, this means that basically we're 3 different computers in one. The implication being that those 80 basic patterns can shift from a fear-based set to a hate-based set to a love-based set, and of course this shift can have a radical impact on our entire mental framework, from our thoughts to our concepts to our beliefs and so forth. Through the practice of meditation, we're able to increase our vibrational frequency and spend more of our time oscillating in love and less time in fear and hate. And this is why gratitude is such an important and effective practice to integrate into our lives. Gratitude is an even higher vibration than love, so when you're in gratitude, your heart automatically shifts to vibrating in love. Most people will go to great lengths and costs to protect their computer, which holds some documents, a few photos, and maybe some games, and yet when it comes to their own consciousness, which is infinitely more valuable, they're reluctant to make the same investment of time or money. Buddha taught us that all of our traits and tendencies come from vasanas, or impressions on our consciousness, and to move beyond our traits and tendencies, all we need to do is remove the impressions through meditation. Performing maintenance on our consciousness is far simpler than people realize. Meditation is effortless and easy to learn. There are many different methods taught and plenty of organizations and teachers available anywhere in the world to learn how. Through the use of a mantra, observation of the breath, or various other techniques, It is possible to begin to distinguish the gaps between thoughts, and in doing so, increase the duration of those gaps longer and longer until you are able to sustain that stillness for a significant amount of time.
Human beings naturally have 4 states of awareness based on either thinking or not thinking, and sleeping and not sleeping. There's the normal waking state, where we're awake and we're thinking. There's the dream state, or REM sleep, where we're thinking but we're not awake. There's the state of deep sleep, where we're neither awake nor are we thinking. And then there's the 4th state, the state of thoughtless awareness, where we're awake but we're not thinking. The first 3 states are states that are familiar to all of us as states we experience in our everyday lives. The 4th state is meditation, where the constant rising and falling of thoughts comes to an end. Meditation is something that we've all experienced as young children and infants, and is something that's as natural to us as swimming is, but something that most of us have forgotten how to do. In this 4th state of thoughtless awareness, we think neither of the past nor of the future. We are entirely in the present moment, in the state of being, and we don't squander the precious moments of life thinking about times that are gone forever or still yet to come. We begin to enjoy ourself, our spirit, our own inner beauty, and the beauty of all of creation. We begin to enjoy being, and we begin to evolve. And we begin to realize we are not our bodies, and once we begin to accept this truth, the knowledge dawns that there's nothing to fear, and we can set out to live life to its fullest.
And to do that, it is essential to begin practicing some form of daily mental hygiene and integrating those habits into your daily routine, just like brushing your teeth and bathing. It is said that we are all already enlightened. We just need to shed the outer husk that prevents us from knowing our true selves. There's no time like the present moment to begin the process of awakening. And for those of you who say you don't have the time, well, I would have to disagree. You have eternity. Your consciousness isn't going anywhere. If not this lifetime, then maybe the next, or the one after that. If not for yourself, do it for your children, or your parents, or your ancestors. There's been literally hundreds of research studies carried out and subsequent papers published on just some of the many benefits of meditation. No matter who you are, meditation will enrich your life. If you're a student, meditation will help you perform higher on exams and make you more efficient getting your assignments done. For musicians, artists, and authors, meditation will open up your creative energy and allow your juices to flow more freely. If you're into sports, from everything from the occasional golfer to the Ironman triathlete, meditating will help you maintain focus and perform at your highest levels. For those of us who are educators, mentors, and coaches, meditation will increase our capacity to communicate more effectively with those we are trying to reach, so that we will be in the best position to serve them. And for engineers and scientists, integrating meditation practices into your daily life will improve your mental acuity and increase your intuitive skills, thereby making your ability to solve problems significantly better. People who work in high-stress environments, such as emergency room doctors, policemen, firefighters, and even soldiers, will definitely benefit from meditation, as their capacity to move through their activities without absorbing as much of that stress will also increase. Whatever it is that you do, it doesn't matter. Meditation will make you better. In closing, I'd like to leave you with this short quote about meditation from renowned spiritual teacher Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. Every cell in the body has the capacity to hold infinity. While a worm also eats, sleeps, wakes, and performs its daily activities, there is no point for us in living like that. We must tap the full potential that nature has bestowed on us, the potential to hold infinity in every cell of the body. For that, we must practice meditation regularly. It only takes a few minutes every day, And once imbibed into the daily routine, meditation is no more a burden or a chore. The confluence of knowledge, understanding, and practice makes life complete. When you grow into higher states of consciousness, you find that you are no longer thrown off balance by different situations and disturbances. You become beautiful, yet strong, a soft, delicate, and beautiful blossom capable of accommodating different values in life without any conditions.